The story of World War II is filled with tales of brave soldiers, brilliant generals, and powerful leaders whose names are etched into the pages of history. But among these well-known figures, there exists a man whose contribution was just as crucial, yet his methods were anything but conventional. His name was Juan Pujol Garcia, a seemingly ordinary man from Catalonia, Spain. He was not a soldier who carried a rifle or a general who commanded armies. Instead, his weapons were his imagination, his quick wit, and an extraordinary talent for telling convincing lies. To the British, he was their most valuable asset, codenamed Agent Garbo. To the Germans, he was their most trusted agent in Britain, a man they called Arabelle. In reality, he was a master illusionist, a spy who single-handedly created an entire network of phantom agents to deceive the highest levels of the Nazi command. What makes the tale of Juan Pujol so special is that he was a volunteer, a man driven not by orders or payment, but by a deep-seated hatred of extremism and a desire to do something good for humanity. He started his espionage career with no training, no contacts, and no support. He simply decided one day that he would fight against the tyranny of Adolf Hitler, and he pursued this goal with a relentless determination that is truly astonishing. He approached the British intelligence services, offering his help, but they turned him away, skeptical of this unknown Spaniard. Undeterred, he decided on a bolder path. He would first become a German spy, and then offer his services to the Allies as a double agent. It was a plan so audacious, so filled with risk, that it seemed destined for failure from the very beginning. This essay will explore the incredible journey of this remarkable man, from his humble beginnings as a failed chicken farmer to his role as the linchpin in the most successful deception operation of the entire war. We will delve into the creative genius he employed to fool the German intelligence machine, inventing a cast of 27 fictional sub-agents, each with their own detailed backstory, personality, and role in his imaginary spy ring. These were not mere names on a page. They were fully formed characters in a grand drama that Pujol directed, scripted, and starred in. His reports, a mixture of real intelligence, clever speculation, and outright fantasy, were so convincing that the Germans trusted him completely, never once suspecting that their star agent was working against them from the very start. Agent Garbo's story is more than just a thrilling spy adventure. It is a powerful testament to the idea that one person, armed with courage and a vivid imagination, can indeed change the course of history. His work was not about violence or sabotage in the traditional sense. It was about manipulating information, about playing a psychological game on the grandest stage imaginable, with the fate of the free world hanging in the balance. He was, as his British case officer aptly named him, the greatest actor in the world, and his performance saved countless lives. His tale reminds us that heroism comes in many forms, and sometimes the most powerful weapon is a well-told story. Juan Pujol Garcia was born in Barcelona, Spain, in 1912, into a world that would soon be torn apart by conflict and ideological battles. He was not a natural-born adventurer or a scholar destined for greatness. His early life was a series of modest, often unsuccessful ventures. He managed a poultry farm, which failed. He tried his hand at running a cinema. He was, by all accounts, an ordinary man trying to find his place in a rapidly changing society. Spain itself was a political tinderbox, and Pujol's experiences during the Spanish Civil War, which erupted in 1936, would fundamentally shape his worldview and set him on his extraordinary path. He was caught in the middle of a brutal conflict between the nationalists, led by Francisco Franco and supported by Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy, and the Republicans, supported by the Soviet Union. Pujol was forced to serve on both sides of the conflict, an experience that left him with a profound and lasting disgust for all forms of political extremism. He detested the rigid, brutal control of the fascists, just as much as he despised the chaotic and often violent ideology of the communists. He saw firsthand the suffering that these fanatical beliefs inflicted upon ordinary people. He witnessed the lies, the propaganda, and the complete disregard for human life that characterized both regimes. This was not a theoretical or academic dislike. It was a deep, personal revulsion forged in the crucible of war. He came to believe that the world needed a third way, a path of humanity, decency, and freedom that stood in opposition to these totalitarian nightmares. This conviction became the driving force behind his decision to enter the much larger conflict of World War II. When Hitler's armies began their march across Europe, Pujol saw the same destructive ideology he had witnessed in Spain, now threatening to engulf the entire continent. He felt a moral obligation to act, to contribute in some small way to the fight against this evil. He was not a citizen of any of the Allied nations, and he had no military training to speak of. He was simply a man with a conscience, a husband and father who believed that the fight for freedom was everyone's fight. He decided that his unique skills, his imagination, and his ability to persuade could be put to use for the Allied cause. His motivation was pure and unwavering. He desired no fame, no fortune, and no personal glory. He later explained that he felt a duty to the good of humanity. This simple but powerful idea propelled him forward, giving him the courage to undertake a mission that most would consider insane. He was not fighting for a flag or a king, but for a principle. His war was against the dehumanizing forces of fascism and communism, and he was determined to use his mind as a weapon to help the side he believed represented liberty and human dignity. This Catalan chicken farmer was about to step onto the world stage, driven by a powerful and deeply personal moral compass. With his mind set on helping the Allies, Juan Pujol's first logical step was to approach the British. In early 1941, he made his way to the British Embassy in Madrid, Spain, filled with a sense of purpose and a plan to offer his services as a spy. He explained his desire to fight against the Nazis and proposed that he could go to London and report on what he saw. However, the British officials were deeply suspicious. Who was this unknown Spaniard with no credentials, no experience, and a rather far-fetched story? In the cautious and paranoid world of espionage, an unsolicited volunteer was often seen as a potential double agent sent by the enemy, or simply a fantasist. They politely, but firmly, turned him away, not once but 3 separate times. A lesser man would have given up. Rejection from the very people he wanted to help would have been enough to discourage even the most determined individual. But Pujol was not a lesser man. His resolve was only strengthened by the setback. He realized that if the British would not accept him as one of their own, he would have to find another way to prove his worth. It was at this moment that his truly audacious and brilliant plan began to take shape. If he could not join the British directly, he would first join the Germans. He would convince them that he was a committed pro-Nazi sympathizer and become their agent. Then, once he had gained their trust, he would turn around and offer his services to the British as a ready-made double agent. To achieve this, Pujol had to create a new identity for himself. He invented a persona of a fanatical fascist, a Spanish government official who could travel to London on official business and would be perfectly placed to spy for Germany. He approached the German intelligence, the Abwehr, in Madrid, with his fabricated story. Unlike the British, the Germans were far more receptive. They were eager to expand their spy networks in Britain and saw Pujol, with his convincing pro-Nazi rhetoric, as a promising candidate. They gave him a crash course in the basics of espionage. Media group, demonstration of invisible ink use, 1940s spy training with codebooks, a stock redistribute equally, how to use secret ink, how to create a cover story, and how to communicate sensitive information. They gave him a code name, Arabelle, and a supply of cash, and sent him on his mission to Britain. There was, however, one enormous problem with this plan. Pujol had no way of actually getting to Britain. Spanish officials were not being sent to London, and he had no visa or official permission to travel. Undeterred, he moved to Lisbon, Portugal, and from there, he began his career as a German spy reporting on Britain, without ever leaving the Iberian Peninsula. He bought a tourist guidebook to Britain, a map, and a few reference books on the Royal Navy. Using these limited resources and his boundless imagination, he began to invent a stream of intelligence reports to send back to his German handlers. He was now a spy, working for the very people he despised, and his grand deception had officially begun. Operating from his apartment in Lisbon, Juan Pujol, now known to the Germans as Agent Arabelle, began to construct an entirely fictional reality. He used his tourist guide, a blue guide to Britain, and public information available in Portuguese newspapers and newsreels to craft his reports. He mixed snippets of real, often outdated information with elaborate fabrications. For example, he reported on the movements of a convoy of ships leaving Liverpool, a detail he cleverly deduced from news reports, but he would add his own dramatic flair, describing the ships and their supposed cargo in vivid detail. His German handlers, located hundreds of miles away in Madrid, had no reason to doubt the authenticity of his information. They were impressed by his initiative and the apparent richness of his intelligence. Pujol's reports were masterpieces of creative writing. He understood that to be believable, his information needed to be a mixture of the important and the mundane. He would describe troop movements and naval deployments, but he would also write about the price of beer in a London pub or the complaints of a Glaswegian dock worker. This level of detail made his fictional world feel real and lived in. He even created excuses for why his information sometimes arrived too late to be useful, blaming the slow and unreliable mail service. In one famous instance, he reported on a naval fleet leaving Liverpool for Malta, but timed his letter so it would arrive after the fleet had already reached its destination. The Germans, far from being angry, were impressed that his intelligence was correct, and they blamed the postal delay, not their agent. Meanwhile, Pujol was still trying to make contact with the Allies. His fictional reports to the Germans were becoming more and more elaborate, and he knew he could not maintain the charade forever without real support. As his value to the Germans grew, the British, who were intercepting and decrypting German communications, began to notice messages mentioning a highly active and seemingly effective agent named Arabelle operating in Britain. They were initially baffled, as they had no record of such a spy. After some investigation, they realized that this mysterious agent Arabelle's reports were coming from Lisbon, not London. They finally understood that the man they had rejected months earlier was now single-handedly running a sophisticated deception operation against the Nazis. In April 1942, the British Secret Intelligence Service, MI5, finally located Pujol and brought him to London. They were astounded by what he had accomplished entirely on his own. They gave him the codename Garbo, because in their eyes, he was the best actor in the world. From this point on, Pujol was no longer a lone wolf. He was now a formal double agent, working with a dedicated MI5 case officer, Thomas Harris. Together, they would take Pujol's initial deception and expand it into the most complex and successful counterintelligence operation of the war. The Germans, completely unaware of this development, believed their star agent had finally made it to the heart of the enemy's territory, ready to provide them with even more valuable intelligence. Now based in London and working directly with MI5, Garbo's operation really began to expand. He and his handler, Tommy Harris, were honestly a perfect team. Harris, who spoke fluent Spanish, helped Garbo refine his reports, making sure they included just the right mix of truth and falsehood to be both convincing and, well, misleading. Their main task was to build upon the foundation Garbo had already laid and create a vast, completely imaginary network of sub-agents. The Germans believed Arabelle, Garbo's codename, was a master recruiter, a charismatic spy master who had managed to build an entire ring of informants spread across the length and breadth of Britain. This fictional network was Garbo's greatest creation. Each of the 27 phantom agents in Garbo's network was a fully developed character. There was a Venezuelan student in Glasgow, a disgruntled Welsh nationalist leading a group of fascist sympathizers, a talkative Gibraltarian waiter working in a military club in Chislehurst, and even a secretary in a government ministry. Garbo gave them all names, personalities, personal problems, and distinct writing styles. He would spend hours crafting reports from each of them, meticulously ensuring their stories were consistent. Some agents were highly efficient, while others were, honestly, lazy or prone to exaggeration. One agent even died, and Garbo went so far as to arrange for his fictional widow to receive a pension from the German government, a request the Germans sorrowfully granted. This phantom army served a crucial purpose. It allowed Garbo to explain how he could gather so much information from so many different parts of the country. If the Germans wanted information about troop movements in Scotland, Garbo would activate his Glasgow agent. If they needed details on naval activity in the English Channel, his waiter agent in Dover would provide a report. To make the deception even more real, Harris and Garbo would plant small, verifiable pieces of real intelligence, often information that was of minor importance or would soon be publicly known, into the reports. This built a foundation of trust and made the more significant lies that followed all the more believable to the Abwehr. The Germans were completely enthralled by Garbo and his network. They sent him vast sums of money to pay his non-existent agents and funded his fictional lifestyle as a high-flying spy master. They genuinely believed he was their most precious intelligence asset in the entire Allied world. They lavished him with praise and encouragement, urging him to recruit even more agents. Meanwhile, the British were intercepting all these communications, reading the Germans' replies, and using that knowledge to fine-tune Garbo's performance. It was honestly a perfect feedback loop of deception. Garbo was not just fooling the Germans, he was playing them like a finely tuned instrument, and he was about to use this influence to conduct his symphony. As 1944 began, the Allies were preparing for the largest amphibious invasion in history, the D-Day landings in Normandy. The success of this monumental operation, codenamed Operation Overlord, depended on achieving tactical surprise. The Allies knew that if the Germans correctly guessed the time and place of the invasion, they would be able to concentrate their powerful panzer divisions and push the landing forces back into the sea. To prevent this, the Allies devised a grand deception plan called Operation Fortitude. Its goal was simple but incredibly ambitious: to convince Adolf Hitler and the German High Command that the main invasion would occur not at Normandy, but at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. Agent Garbo and his Phantom network were placed at the very center of this elaborate deception. He was to be the primary channel through which the Germans would receive proof of this fictitious invasion plan. The Allies created a massive illusion in southeastern England, the area near the Pas de Calais. They built entire armies of inflatable tanks, plywood aircraft, and dummy landing craft. They generated fake radio traffic to simulate the communications of a massive military force, a fictional army group called the First United States Army Group, supposedly commanded by the famous General George S. Patton. All of this physical deception was designed to be seen by German reconnaissance, but it was Garbo's job to interpret it and sell the story to his German masters. Garbo and his network of imaginary spies began sending a torrent of messages to the Abwehr. His agents across Britain reported on the massive buildup of Fusag troops in Kent and Essex. They described the insignia on soldiers' uniforms, the movement of supply trucks, and conversations overheard in pubs, all of it meticulously scripted by Garbo and Harris to reinforce the Pas de Calais narrative. They sent over 500 radio messages in the months leading up to the invasion, creating a rich and detailed tapestry of lies. The Germans, who had trusted Garbo implicitly for years, accepted his reporting without question. It confirmed what they already suspected and wanted to believe, that the Allies would choose the shortest and most logical route to cross the Channel. The sheer volume and consistency of Garbo's reporting had a profound effect. The German intelligence services compiled his information and passed it up the chain of command, where it landed on the desk of Adolf Hitler himself. Hitler became personally convinced that the main Allied attack would come at the Pas de Calais. He ordered his most powerful armored divisions, the elite Panzer Reserves, to be stationed there, ready to repel the invasion he was sure was coming. This strategic decision, based almost entirely on the fabrications of a single double agent and his imaginary army, was Garbo's greatest achievement, and the masterstroke of Operation Fortitude. The stage was now set for the real invasion. On the morning of June 6, 1944, the real Allied invasion began. Over 150,000 soldiers landed on the beaches of Normandy, a region of France far to the west of the Pas de Calais. When news of the landings reached the German High Command, they were confused. This did not match the intelligence they had been receiving from their top agent, Arabelle. Their immediate reaction was to assume that a Normandy invasion was a feint, a smaller diversionary attack designed to draw their forces away from the Pas de Calais, where the real and much larger invasion was still expected to land. This was the critical moment. Garbo's job was not over. In fact, his most important task was just beginning. He had to keep the Germans believing the lie, even as Allied troops were storming the beaches. On D-Day itself, Garbo sent a desperate, frantic message to his German handlers, time to be received in the late morning. He claimed that his fictional agent on the south coast had witnessed the invasion fleet sailing and had tried to warn them, but that he, Garbo, had been delayed. He expressed immense frustration and anger, which made his performance all the more convincing. Then, in the hours and days that followed, he and his network of phantom spies went into overdrive. They sent a flood of reports confirming the Germans' preconceived notion. They reported that Fusag was still in southeastern England, its troops and equipment ready and waiting. They insisted that the Normandy landings were a secondary operation and that the main blow was yet to fall. The effect of this sustained deception was decisive. Convinced by Garbo's intelligence, Hitler refused to release the powerful 15th Army and its panzer divisions from the Pas de Calais to reinforce the German defenders in Normandy. For several crucial weeks after D-Day, while the Allies were struggling to establish and expand their fragile beachhead, the Germans held their strongest forces in reserve, waiting for a phantom invasion that would never come. This delay gave the Allies the precious time they needed to land more troops, more equipment, and more supplies. It allowed them to secure their foothold in France and begin the slow, arduous push inland. Historians agree that Garbeau's deception was a critical factor in the success of D-Day. By tying down elite German divisions, he saved thousands of Allied lives and may well have prevented the invasion from failing. The German command was so thoroughly fooled that they were still expecting an attack at the Pas de Calais as late as August 1944, 2 months after the Normandy landings. Garbeau had not just fed them false information, he had manipulated their entire strategic understanding of the war. It was a psychological victory of incalculable value, achieved not with bombs or bullets, but with a typewriter, a radio, and the extraordinary imagination of one man. By the end of the war, Juan Pujol Garcia had achieved something no other spy in history ever has. He was decorated by both sides of the conflict. In July 1944, just weeks after his masterful D-Day deception, the Germans awarded him the Iron Cross, one of their highest military honors. They sent the medal to him via their embassy in Madrid, believing they were rewarding their most brilliant agent for his invaluable service to the Third Reich. The citation praised his extraordinary merits and his contributions to the German war effort. They had no idea that the very intelligence for which they were honoring him was a complete fiction designed to ensure their defeat. Pujol had the unique and surreal distinction of being decorated by Hitler for having fooled him so completely. Just a few months later, in November 1944, Pujol was secretly awarded the MBE, Member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, by King George VI. The British recognized him for his pivotal role in the success of Operation Fortitude and his immense contribution to the Allied victory. The ceremony was, of course, conducted in private, as his true identity and his work remained a closely guarded secret. It is a perfect symbol of his life as a double agent, a man who lived in the shadows, receiving the highest accolades from two opposing worlds, each believing he was exclusively their own. He had played his part so perfectly that both the heroes and the villains of the story wanted to give him a medal. After the war, Pujol feared for his life. He was worried that surviving Nazi loyalists might seek revenge if they ever discovered his true identity and the scale of his betrayal. He wanted to disappear and return to a normal, anonymous life. With the help of MI5, he faked his own death from malaria in Angola in 1949. The world, including his own family in Spain, believed he was gone. He moved to Venezuela, where he started a new life, running a small bookstore and gift shop. He remarried and had children, never speaking of his past or his secret role in the war. Agent Garbeau, the master spy, had vanished, and Juan Pujol, the quiet shopkeeper, lived on in complete obscurity. For decades, the world knew nothing of the man who had tricked Hitler. His story remained buried in classified government files. It was not until 1984, when a British politician and writer named Nigel West became obsessed with tracking down the mysterious Agent Garbeau, that the truth began to emerge. West, believing Garbeau was likely dead, embarked on a long search, eventually tracking Pujol down to his home in a small town in Venezuela. The elderly Pujol, then 72 years old, finally agreed to tell his story. He returned to Europe, where he was emotionally reunited with his old MI5 case officer Thomas Harris, and visited the beaches of Normandy, where his web of lies had helped change the world. The story of Juan Pujol Garcia, Agent Garbeau, is more than just a fascinating chapter in the history of espionage. It is a powerful and inspiring lesson about the nature of courage, the power of creativity, and the impact one individual can have on world events. Pujol was not a trained soldier or a professional intelligence officer. He was an ordinary man who, armed with an extraordinary imagination and an unshakable moral conviction, took on one of the most evil regimes in history. His story challenges our conventional ideas of heroism, showing that bravery is not always found on the battlefield. Sometimes it is found in the quiet, patient, and meticulous work of building a better, more truthful life. Pujol's legacy is a testament to the power of the human mind as a weapon. In a war defined by industrial might and military hardware, his contribution was almost entirely intellectual and psychological. He understood his enemy's mindset, their biases, and their expectations, and he used that understanding to create a narrative they were primed to believe. His phantom network of spies was a work of fiction so compelling that it reshaped reality. This teaches us that information, and the control of it, can be as powerful as any army. In our modern world, saturated with information and disinformation, Garbo's story serves as a potent reminder of the importance of critical thinking and the danger of believing a story simply because it feels true. Furthermore, his life reminds us that it is possible for one person to make a profound difference. Faced with the seemingly unstoppable force of Nazism, Pujol did not succumb to despair or apathy. He chose to act. His initial efforts were clumsy and were rejected by the very people he sought to help. Yet, he persevered, adapting his strategy and using his unique talents to forge his own path. His journey from a failed chicken farmer to a war hero decorated by both sides is an incredible example of determination and ingenuity. It inspires us to believe that no matter how small or insignificant we may feel, we all have the capacity to contribute to a greater good. Today, the tale of Agent Garbo continues to captivate and inspire. It is a story of a man who fought a war with his wits, a double agent who served a single, noble cause, the cause of humanity. He was, as his codename suggested, the world's greatest actor, and his stage was the whole of World War II. His performance saved countless lives and helped secure the freedom we enjoy today. The legacy of Juan Pujol Garcia is not just in the battles that were won, but in the powerful idea that courage, creativity, and a belief in a better world are the most potent weapons of all. He proved that sometimes, the most effective way to fight a monstrous lie is to create a more brilliant one.